Hello and welcome to the first episode of Reagan Rants. I am your host, Reagan Revived, and this podcast is hopefully going to be my new outlet for talking about politics outside of Twitter in a longer form discussion than 280 characters, or really long tweet threads. So if you hadn't already guessed, based on if you did come from Twitter, if you've seen the posts I make, I already lean pretty heavily to the right. I'm a conservative, libertarian, borderline social liberal on some issues. But the biggest thing about me is that I'm a very critical person. I'm a very cynical person also. The thing is, I tend not to just declare something as fact. I mean, even I sometimes break that rule when I feel really passionate about something, but most of the time, I really try to be careful about what I'm just saying, just declaring out loud. And a lot of what I believe is often tainted by the fringe conspiracy theorists on the right. So really, that's part of the reason I started up this show, is because I want to actually rein in our side of the aisle pretty much. Or at least I want to start doing that. Obviously, I'm not a very large show. I'm brand new. I just started this. I'm recording this in my college dorm room. What the hell can I do from just myself? But if nothing else, I just want people to have an open discussion and not assume that anyone who disagrees with them is automatically stupid. I know I go off on leftists a lot on Twitter, but two things. It's Twitter, and they're leftists on Twitter. Leftists on Twitter are not representative of real-life leftists, and also leftists are different from liberals. Liberals actually believe in liberty and freedom of the individual. Leftists, unfortunately, are becoming more and more socialist in their mainstream beliefs. Which isn't to say that conservatives are immune from increasingly fringe beliefs as well, but that's a topic for a different video, as is the topic of socialism. The bottom line is, I just want people to talk to each other like humans. That's my biggest problem. And so essentially with this show, it's not just going to be debates. I actually don't really want to do debates at all. Firstly, the show is mainly going to be me just talking about current events and my opinions of them, but in such a way that at least lends credence to the opposite perspective, the idea that I might be wrong about something. It's a sort of humility that's been lost, I think, on a lot of people. The ability to admit that they are not correct about everything automatically. Now, secondly, in addition to just fostering a healthier discussion, I want people to challenge their own beliefs, as I do mine all the time. It's important to look at what you believe in the face of new evidence to the contrary, and see whether or not you're willing to adapt, or if you doubt the credibility of the evidence, because, of course, there are some studies that are deliberately manipulated to further certain narratives. It's really unfortunate. Information science is constantly being politicized. But the bottom line is, you need to be able to examine your own beliefs over time and see if they've strengthened or if they've changed. And then you need to understand why. Now, all of that, hopefully, is going to culminate into this show, and hopefully I can make something of this. So, without further ado, let's just dive into today's topics. So the first thing I want to talk about is, you probably heard I sound dead, sound really quiet, sound really flat and monotone. That's my problem. I'm in a college dorm. It's a suite. There are 5 of us living here. I have a single bedroom, but the walls are super thin. And if I talk loudly enough, my roommate next door, he'll knock on the wall, tell me to quiet down because it's too late and he's trying to sleep. Can't blame him. He's got much better work ethic than me. He's up a lot earlier. I mean, his classes are scheduled earlier. Getting off on a tangent, bottom line is, I have to be a little bit quieter for now. I have no real studio or quiet room to go to. There's no time when I'm the only one in the room. So I have no means of actually recording this show in a proper setup. I'm literally sitting in my armchair with a laptop and my mic. That's all I've got. But anyway, that's the first thing I wanted to get out of the way. The topics I actually want to discuss. Firstly, this notion like a week or two ago that we were on the brink of World War III. I know it's kind of old news already, which I'd been saying for the whole time that it would be. So if you don't remember, basically, President Trump, ordered a strike on Iran, a drone strike that took out the terrorist leader of the Quds Force, the State Department designated terror group. His name was Qasem Soleimani. He was a very prominent general in Iran, widely perceived to be the number 2 to succeed Ayatollah Khamenei, or Khamenei, however the hell you pronounce it. I don't give a shit. A bunch of terrorists, okay? That's a bit of a generalization, but Iran's government is run top to bottom by terrorists, terror supporters. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. And basically, Qasem Soleimani was pretty much seen as the second in command in Iran, and Trump basically ordered him dead. He was in Iraq. Trump was given notice, and he said, fire away. And so Soleimani died, and the entire world went nuts. Trump is putting us on the brink of war. It's going to be World War III. It was trending all over the place. There were memes. The memes were great, by the way. The memes were hysterical. Leave it to the internet to take a very serious situation and take the piss out of it by just making memes. I mean, it's not untrue that if there were just an asteroid on an imminent collision course with Earth would create a mass extinction event, there'd be a meme. Somebody would make a meme of it. It'd be the last meme humankind ever made. But anyway, basically we killed Soleimani in retaliation for groups that we now believe were actually led by Soleimani, or at least an attack that was plotted and led by Soleimani on our embassy in Baghdad. The American embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, was lit on fire just a couple days before we killed Soleimani. So the people calling this an escalation, I mean, keep in mind, Iran, the same country whose leader sponsored this attack on our embassy, Iran bombed Saudi oil fields. They took over ships in the Straits of Hormuz. A couple years back, they even took one of our ships and held several Americans prisoner. None of this led to a war. Not all of it happened under Trump, of course, but the oil fields and taking over ships in the Straits of Hormuz, that did happen under Trump. We didn't go to war. We didn't really enforce a red line either. That was Obama's biggest problem. He would draw a red line and then let Iran or Syria or whoever trample all over it. But the embassy was the last straw. Basically, they burned our embassy. Trump said, all right, that's enough. We're taking our firm stance here. You're done screwing with us. Now, apparently, this had been in the works since last summer, this strike. So maybe it wasn't the embassy, but that might have just been a PR move. Like, oh, look, Iran did a really nasty looking thing. So now is the right time to go for it. We had the chance. Go. None of us really know the truth. But the bottom line is it really was not an escalation. We weren't on the brink of war. It was never going to happen. The whole time, people are freaking out. Trump's going to bring back the draft, and we're going to go to war. It's going to be World War III. We're all going to die. There's going to be bombs dropped on our cities here in America. No. Okay, no. A lot of that was just gullible panic from a bunch of people online who will believe anything. Unfortunately, it kind of works. It gets people scared. There were people I was personally talking to who were telling me how terrified they were of getting drafted. The draft hasn't been used in, 50 years? Nobody's going to get drafted. And war, I mean, come on. We've been in a proxy conflict with Iran, or even a direct conflict with Iran, for 40 years, since 1979. We've been in a more or less armed conflict with Iran, but never a direct declared shooting war. At most, we were fighting proxy groups, Iranian-sponsored terror groups. That was the closest we ever came. this idea that we were right there on the edge of launching the biggest global conflict since the end of the Second World War, since the Cold War, is ridiculous. I mean, for one thing, it was just us and Iran. People were talking like Iran's gonna get allies in Russia and China, and Russia has nukes, so we're all screwed. Come on, people. Russia was never gonna nuke us. Russia was never gonna side with Iran. But Russia was certainly not gonna nuke us. And if people seem to forget, we have nukes too. And ours could get there a lot quicker. Ours are a little more advanced. Our firepower is a lot stronger. Our raw output. I mean, what? Russia has a lot of men. Their army, they have a large standing army. That's just people. We have technology. We have the machines. We have the weapons. We have the technical prowess. And we have the strategists. We know what we're doing. We're not screwing around. The idea that Iran would have even been a worthy adversary in a war, ridiculous. Again, it's like sending a peewee football team from your local elementary school to face your favorite NFL team. It's not even a contest. And then there's people say, oh, but what about the guerrilla warfare that kept us from really finishing up in Afghanistan? No. Okay, Iran would not run and hide and try to take us out in little pockets of attacks. They would want to look tough. Iran would want to look tough for its people. But the Ayatollah knows that the first person to die if we go to war is him. The mullahs know. They're all dead. There's no question. I mean, again, we had a lock on their lead terrorist, a veteran general, within days after they lit our embassy on fire. Days. Just boom. Done. And maybe it's just a coincidental timing. Maybe we just had good intel and we're waiting to act on it. Again, we're not screwing around anymore. And of course, people have problems with that. They think we're the agitators in the region. But I just said, we're not agitating anybody. Iran has been pushing and pushing and pushing. We finally pushed back, and now it's war. No. We're just hitting back for what they did to us. I mean, Iran, when they shot down a drone, and I said, okay, so we take out a ship or something. It's a tit for tat. People are like, oh my God, you want to go to full-scale war with Iran? No. Okay, no. I don't want full-scale war with Iran. Iran doesn't want full-scale war with us. Nobody wants to go to war. We just want to enforce a red line in the sand. You cannot cross this line without facing backlash. That's one of the better things Trump has done. Not only that, but Trump also kind of got Iran backed into a corner on the nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Because now Iran is saying, well, if you're going to do that, we're not going to abide by the deal anymore. And then Europe, France, Germany, today, they came out and they're like, okay, you've got 30 days to stop violating the nuclear deal, or we're putting sanctions back on you. This comes after Trump already announced sanctions on Iran himself. Really, as chaotic as Trump's presidency has been, this past couple of weeks has just a comparison to the rest of his presidency, this has been one of the most measured months, just purely strategic, actually productive months of his presidency. It's been a brilliant outcome for us, certainly, and most of our allies, because realistically, the conflict in Iran could have gotten worse. It's not out of the question that there could have been further escalation, but there wasn't. Because like I said, Iran doesn't want a war with us. Look what happened when they lobbed missiles at our base. People were saying, oh my God, this is it. Here it comes. This is World War III. It wasn't. Okay? Iran wanted footage for their propaganda state television. They just wanted to look tough. Look at us, taking the fight straight to the Americans. There's only one problem. The base was barely damaged. Nobody was hurt. That's two problems, actually, but The point is, Iran actually called the base ahead of time and said, get your guys out of the way. We're doing this as a PR stunt. We don't want to kill anybody. We don't want a war. We're scared of what's going to happen if Trump finds out we killed someone. That last part may be embellished a little bit, but the main point is still true. Iran called the base to make sure nobody was in harm's way while they threw a bunch of missiles at us. But then, that night, they got a little too trigger happy, and that leads us to our next topic. So, if you've been living under a rock the past couple days, you won't know that that same night Iran was shooting missiles at us and we weren't shooting anything back. This wasn't crossfire. This was whoever was in charge of launching the missiles getting too trigger happy. Iran shot down a passenger airliner, civilian airliner, a Ukrainian Boeing, I think a 747, that originated from Tehran airport. After 2 minutes of being in flight, they shot it down. Iran shot down this airplane and killed 176 people. Something like that. I think 176, near 180 people. And the protests have been severe. Now, you want to talk about when Soleimani was killed. American media outlets, they tried so desperately to turn this into an actual stupid move by Trump, right? Trump turned Soleimani into a martyr. His people, the people of Iran, loved him. I mean, after all, just look. Look at all these mourners, so deeply moved. If Trump has done anything, he's united Iran against us. Most of those people were out mourning because they were compelled to by their oppressive government. Okay? The Iranian people don't really like terrorists that much. And I mean, just look at the reaction to this airliner incident, which 180 people just unnecessarily were murdered by the Iranian regime, which people have been saying, oh, it's because Trump escalated tensions. No, it's not. Okay, Trump didn't do anything that night. The U.S. didn't do anything. Iran launched missiles at us. We fired nothing back. And an airplane got shot down. And there was an earthquake, but that's completely unrelated. Everything hit the fan all at once. Iran is the only party to blame in killing those people. And the Iranian citizens understand that. Because they took to the streets more than they already were. Keep in mind, the media barely reported when Iranian protests happened before, and the Iranian regime killed 1,500 protesters. It was barely in the news. Now it's right up front. Because the Iranian people are sick of their government being run by a bunch of terrorists. President Trump, he gave an address to the nation after that Iranian attack on our base, and he basically said, look, you guys can join the family of nations whenever you want. Stop being terrorists. Stop funding terrorism. Open your country to the world, and the world will open its arms to you, basically. Do the right thing, be diplomatic. So I have to applaud Trump for that. He was very careful in that speech. It was a teleprompted speech, granted, but he was very careful. He took the right measured tone. I'm normally lukewarm on Trump. I'm not a hardcore Trump fan. I've been very critical of him in the past. But on this one, I have to hand it to him. It's one of the most strategically brilliant things he's done as president. It only took him 3 years to do it. But the thing is, in Iran itself, right, this is the thing that the media, they're reporting on the protests, but they're not really getting the details right. You'll notice they still find a way to blame Trump for all this, making it a problem. But, again, these are the same people coming off of we were on the brink of World War III, and now they're like, it's Trump's fault that Iran is in chaos right now. No, it's Iran's fault, because they're the ones murdering nearly 200 innocent people for no reason. It was an airplane that originated from an Iranian airport. It was over Iranian airspace, and it was hit by an Iranian missile. It's only Iran's fault. And the protests, it's fascinating to see. Because ordinarily, now the media are saying, death to America, death to America. That's what they're saying over there. Which is what conservatives have been saying for a long time. But then you look where they lay out an American flag and an Israeli flag for the protesters to trample and burn. They walk around the flag. And the things they are tearing down are posters of Soleimani. Again, the Iranian people hate their leaders. At least a good portion of them hate their leaders. They want change. And now I'm not using that as an excuse to say we need to go in there and effect a change. I'm not stumping for an invasion. I'm not stumping for a coup. I'm not stumping to overthrow their government. That is the people's job. It's not our job to overthrow another country's government. We can't do that for the Iranian people. They need to understand they can rise up and fix this whole mess. And they need to do it. When the Obama administration was saying that the mullahs now were going to be moderate after the Iran deal, crock of shit, basically. It was a crock of shit. The only way the Iranian regime is going to moderate is if you get rid of it entirely. And not at our hand. It's not our job to do that. It's the people of Iran. It's their job to do it. That's the only way they're going to really get anywhere. I mean, look at the way Iran was developing socially. It was a thriving nation. And then a fundamentalist Islamic revolution took place in 1979 and completely ruined the track the country was on. It's gone from a really up-and-coming nation to just stagnating and even declining over the last 40 years. It needs to change. It's up to the Iranian people to change it. Now, the final thing I want to talk about in this episode, it has nothing to do with Iran. It's actually the Democratic primary. So today is January 14th. It's the final debate before the Iowa caucus. And boy, howdy, are the Democrats eating their own. And it is glorious to watch. So in case I didn't make it clear in the opening few minutes to this video, I'm not a big fan of the Democrats, personally. I'm not going to vote in the Democratic primary. I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm a registered Republican. I'm a conservative, right-leaning. I have some socially liberal values, you could argue. But I'm mostly a libertarian. I just don't want the government to do a lot of what it does. I want them out of most of the aspects of my life that they've currently invade, right? But anyway, I'm highly critical of the Democratic primary and the candidates that are running. But what I mean when I say eat their own, you'll notice the entire primary up until this point was about the diversity of the Democratic primary, the diversity of the field. There's so many women and people of color and women of color, and Pete Buttigieg, he's a gay man. Now look at the stage. 6 people, all of them white, 5 of them straight, and those same 5 are old. 2 of them are women. You've got Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, and Tom Steyer, the obscure billionaire who just happened to reach the threshold in polling he needed to get on stage. And his money, of course, was an asset. Andrew Yang isn't on stage. He's one of the only racial minorities actually left in the race. Andrew Yang, he's obviously Asian. Tulsi Gabbard. And Deval Patrick, you probably don't even know who Deval Patrick is. Former governor of Massachusetts, I believe, Massachusetts. He has 0.2% in the RCP polling average. He's not going anywhere. But the only reason we don't have, Cory Booker, we don't have Spartacus anymore, he dropped out, like yesterday. So, before that, his main shtick was, okay, Kamala Harris is gone. I am the candidate that black voters have to resonate to, because apparently Democrats are calling their own voters racist if they don't pick candidates of color. I don't know. That's the thing I find hilarious about it, is you'll see leftists on Twitter, so crazy people, essentially ripping their own party up and down for being racist. But there's no Republicans in the Democratic primary voting base. You're essentially calling the only people you can rely on to get yourself elected. You're calling them a bunch of no-good racists. And this is the thing that really proves to me that Democrats don't give two shits about minorities and really women. They just pander for votes. And I can say that because, again, look at the stage. Democratic voters are not resonating to women and minorities. They're not sticking to their own claim that the best people to speak about these issues are the people who have lived those experiences. I mean, again, you've got Warren and Klobuchar on stage. Neither of them have the best shot at winning the nomination. Warren definitely is higher up. She's probably in a solid third place right now. But your top two are both white guys over the age of 70, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. One of them is an avowed communist. So really, it's always been about ideology. It's always been an ideological game, ideological purity. It has basically nothing to do with race. And it's both a bad thing and a good thing. Because it's a good thing, Democrats are resonating more to the competent people. The competent, at least at campaigning, not necessarily at governing, but at campaigning, the competent people. And I guess the well-known people. More so than they are, oh look, a minority. Like, thankfully, Democratic voters are not that shallow. They're not that narrow-minded. They're certainly not as narrow-minded as the candidates seem to think they are. And I applaud them for that. That's why I was saying before, normal liberals, very reasonable people. They have their reasons for supporting Joe Biden, for supporting Bernie Sanders. I may disagree with most of those reasons, but hey, it's a free country. I'm allowed to disagree. So that's what I find ironic, right? They've been spending all this time preaching about representation, and then their top six are all white. And 4 of them are guys. Only one, Pete Buttigieg, is the most intersectionally diverse candidate on stage. He is not only by far the youngest, he's the most educated, he has military experience, he's gay. Again, and yet he's not winning. He's moved down to around 4th place. Actually, in the average, I think Bloomberg is ahead of him. So really, Bloomberg is in 4th or 5th place. Buttigieg is in 4th, right, in the RCP average. So he's not winning any races, Buttigieg. He was ahead in Iowa and New Hampshire most of the time for the last couple weeks, even the last month or two. But now Bernie Sanders is edging him out, and even Joe Biden is starting to climb back. So Buttigieg had his bump a month ago. It's basically gone. And so now you see the insurgency of Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden, I'm not really that fearful of. He's just a doddering old fool, big deal. So is Bernie Sanders, but the problem is he's a far more radical, doddering old fool. And yet he is gaining momentum. And that terrifies me, frankly. Because, never mind the fact, the dude's old. He had a heart attack 3 months ago. I'm not saying he's in bad health, and I sure as hell don't wish any harm on him. I hope he continues to live healthily and happily. He doesn't have any problems. I don't want any harm to come to Bernie Sanders. But at the same time, the policies he's promoting, they frankly scare the hell out of me. And not because I'm afraid he's going to get into office and affect all these radical changes for the people and all that. Like, no, I'm not worried about that. I'm worried just about the danger of them, how disingenuous Bernie has been, how hypocritical he's been. I don't want someone like that being in charge of who we sanction, how we deploy our troops. I don't want him setting the agenda for the United States Congress. I don't want that. I don't want him appointing judges to lifetime appointments. I frankly don't really want Trump doing that either, unless they are qualified, competent nominees, which for the most part they have been. I'm very, very wary of what Bernie Sanders would do in the Oval Office. Most of what he could do, really, he would need, most of what he wants to do, he would need Congress for. And odds are, after 2020, whoever wins the presidency, there's going to be at least one chamber of Congress dominated by Republicans, controlled by Republicans, probably the Senate. I think Republicans are in good position to keep at least 51 seats. So they're good there. But the bottom line is, like, if Bernie Sanders wins in 2020, he's going to have a Republican Senate to deal with the entire time. And then come 2022, the midterms are going to swamp him. 2018 was a blue wave. 2022 is going to be a red wave if Bernie Sanders is in office. So it's going to be really hard for him to get any major legislative change done. But at the same time, there's a lot he can do with the pen and executive orders that Congress has just allowed presidents to do. And that's what scares me. And it's not even just his policies. I could dedicate an entire episode of the show to his policies. I'm mostly afraid of just having somebody who I firmly believe is a devout communist in the Oval Office. I know people, when I get on people's case when they say Trump is a Nazi, but Bernie Sanders is a communist. This has been, just look at the last 40 years of his life. If you only look at him from 2015 and onwards, you can see, sure, okay, he's a socialist. He's a democratic socialist. He only praises Scandinavian socialism and Denmark, even though the leader of Denmark told him, shut up, stop calling us socialist. But look back to, like, 1988. Bernie Sanders, throughout the last few decades, has praised basically every communist dictator, every communist revolution, every Marxist uprising. He has refused to condemn them. He has, in fact, praised their systems over ours. He has claimed that lining up for bread, which most people either don't get, or essentially you're being fed what the government says you get and when. He says lining up for food is better than living in a country where some people have food and others don't. Or essentially how the rich get all the food and the poor starve, he claimed. He praised Fidel Castro, who, to get to power, had to murder a lot of people. He praised Castro for educating his people and improving their health care, on top of the bodies of countless people. But, that's neither here nor there, right? Venezuela. Fine example. Nicolas Maduro saved his country. And then it collapsed, and he shut up about it. He didn't mention a damn thing about Venezuela. I mean, communist China. I don't know the most recent thing Bernie said about communist China, now that I think about it. I don't want to make any claims, but given his track record, I can't imagine, if he has been critical of China, that it has been basically anything to do with the fact that they are communist. If anything, he's most likely criticized China for its Muslim detaining, its camps for Muslim populations in the Xinjiang region. But that's a different story. The main point is, Bernie Sanders has praised communists left and right his entire life. He's praised communist dictatorships for the last 40 years. And he's also a flagrant hypocrite. So you hear him constantly bash capitalism and rich people. I tweeted about this earlier, actually. And I got in a little bit of an off-topic conversation with one of my followers later about tax rates and whatnot. But the bottom line is, Bernie Sanders is worth several $1 million, and he owns 3 lake houses. Or, I know his third house is a lake house. But he owns 3 houses, basically. Kind of like Michael Moore. He's also worth a shitload of money, and he owns 8 houses. They're both rich dudes who complain about rich people. They got rich from capitalism, but they both hate capitalism. And so, Bernie Sanders says, well, how much do you really need? Do you need 3 houses, dude? Like, you've got a place in Vermont to go to be with your constituents, and you've got a place in D.C. to stay at so you don't have to commute every single day. That's all you need when you're a senator. You don't need a vacation home. Or maybe you do. Even then, you still make a lot of money. And to go later and complain about how you don't need that much, you didn't earn that, or we're going to take such and such percentage because other people deserve it more than you. How much has Bernie Sanders paid in taxes? This is the funny thing. There was actually it was a study, or not a study, but I believe it was actually Rachel Maddow obtained Trump's tax returns. This was a couple years ago. Rachel Maddow was like, I finally got Trump's tax returns. And then it turns out Trump paid pretty much exactly what he needed to in taxes. If I'm not mistaken, Trump, as a raw number, or either a raw number or a raw percentage, paid more in taxes than both the entire company of Comcast and Bernie Sanders himself. Which, I mean, obviously Trump paid more than Bernie Sanders because he earns a lot more. Oh, wait, you mean the rich do pay their taxes? Exactly my point. So this idea that, I mean, Bernie is just such a hypocrite on this stuff. And the gaslighting. That's one of my all-time biggest pet peeves. Is one thing actually I do agree with Bernie Sanders on is he's very critical of identity politics. This idea that because he is an old white guy, he doesn't get to really say much. He shouldn't be in power because we should evaluate his candidacy based on the fact that he's an old white guy. He disagrees with that, and I agree with him. I'm so glad Bernie Sanders thinks that. That's one of the most intelligent things the man has ever said. Unfortunately, it's one of the only intelligent things he's ever said. But then, at the same time, he'll invoke his Jewish heritage, even though he is very secular. He's ethnically Jewish, but he's a secular individual. He's not religious. He'll invoke that when people accuse him of being an anti-Semite or enabling anti-Semitism in his party. Bernie just praised the effectiveness of Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and whoever the hell the fourth member of the squad is, I don't remember. He congratulated the squad on being effective at governing, at leading. Ilhan Omar, that Ilhan Omar, the vicious anti-Semite, who cannot help herself, who believes that sanctioning Iran should be just off limits, off the table, but also wants to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. Which, before you get into the whole criticizing Israel is not the same as being anti-Semitic, we're talking about specifically targeting the state of Israel, the world's only Jewish state. Not for reasons of disagreement, but because we think they're occupiers of the land of Palestine. But this is a whole other tangent I don't want to get into right now. I'm already running nearly at my time limit. But look, there's just so many things about Bernie Sanders that drive me up a wall because he knows he's full of shit. At least he's consistent. I mean, Elizabeth Warren actually more understands how full of shit she is, but she just can't bring herself to fully embrace the socialist doctrine. Bernie Sanders sure as hell does. He can bring himself to say whatever he wants. He can just say, look, I've been doing this my whole life. I've been against foreign intervention as long as I can remember, which is probably about 10 minutes. Sorry, that's an ageist joke. I shouldn't say that. But yeah, Bernie's been remarkably consistent. He's just been consistently wrong on basically everything his entire life. And he's a hypocrite on damn near every major thing he's known for. I mean, hell, the dude got kicked out of a commune when he was younger because he was too lazy. How do you get kicked out of a commune for being too lazy? He didn't have a real job until he got elected, and now he's basically been sucking the government's teat for the last 4 decades. We've been paying his salary. So I don't know. I don't know what the hell you're doing, Vermont. You can elect a Republican governor, but then you elect Bernie Sanders. Granted, Phil Scott, very liberal Republican governor, but once again, tangents. The bottom line, for the 5th time, I don't like Bernie Sanders. I really don't, and I am terrified at the idea of him becoming president. If I had to choose, based on what Trump has done versus what Trump has said, and then my other choice was Bernie Sanders any day of the week, I would pick Trump 10 times out of 10, 11 times out of 10. I would pick Trump because I'm looking at results and actual solid economic growth versus pretty much self-declared socialism. This isn't the whole put money in the hands of the people thing. This is, I want the government to control basically every industry. That is communism. That is state-mandated Marxist policy. And it's terrifying, and I really do not want it for this country. But you're welcome to disagree with me and explain why you do in the comments. That's why I started this show. So with that, I'm going to close it off. I hope this was an experimental thing. I really hope I kept the flow decent. And hopefully I didn't bore you to death. I'll try to maybe provide some visuals. The thing is, I don't have a lot of free time. But hopefully, eventually I can add more visuals and graphs and pictures. Maybe even some clips. I want to actually make this an informative show as well as an opinionated one. But for the moment, I just want to know what you thought of the first episode. I want some feedback. I want to know what I could have done better. And I want you to start a discussion in the comments. Keep in mind, I will only reply to constructive comments. If you're just going to listen to all 40 minutes of this and then call me an idiot, or call me an alt-right troll, or a Trump tard or whatever, I'm not going to waste my time. You're not worth talking to, and you just look like a fool in front of everybody who is watching, so that's your problem, not mine. But if you want to have an informative discussion, I might even bring you on the show. If we can set up the right sort of, not even a debate, just a discussion. I don't want to debate people on this show, because I'm not here to tear people down. I'm here to tear down perspectives I disagree with, but I'm not here to tear people down. I'm not trying to win anything. I just want to foster productive discussion and hopefully convince people of my perspective, or at least convince people to consider it. So hopefully, if you've gained nothing else from this, you at least can examine your own politics a little more critically. If you're on the left and you're even maybe a Bernie supporter, you can understand some of the criticisms people have of him and why they're not too sure they'd want to support him. Hopefully you can look at that, and hopefully you can do it with an open eye. And if you want to present to me an argument in favor of Bernie, I'll look at it. I'll try to consider it. I'll try to suspend my bias. Because that's what I want to do. That's what we need to do as a country. And hopefully we can do that. And so with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I look forward to hearing your feedback, and I also look forward to seeing you in future videos. So thank you very much, and I'll see you then. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at Reagan Revived. I will post video updates and other political jargon, or just memes. I do whatever. It's my Twitter account. I can do what I want, okay?